So I'm going to make a little video on my grinding and preform process. Everything's been about the prep work. Seems like everything I've ever done, from drywalling to doing taxidermy work for 20 years and competing at the state levels in taxidermy, but everything just seems to be about the prep work. So this is probably the most important part of the fog process. Make sure everything's set up right, the surfaces are correct, and your platforms are right. But at this point, all I've done so far is cut this out. And then the first thing I do is I would go to either my 8-inch grinder, or I prefer to use my wheels for doing the actual, pretty much the final shape of the point itself. And you can see at the base of this, it was over a 1/4 inch thick to start out with. But so what I want to do, just to save my grinding wheel, is I come over to my high-tech machine, and I put this vertical on here and thin down these edges and start the convexity. You can see where I stopped. I could work with it more if I wanted to, but this is basically just saving my grinding wheels, taking a lot of the pressure off my 8-inch grinding wheels, because they're so expensive. But I do not represent high-tech in any way, shape, or form. They were just what I bought as I got into fog napping. But my 8-inch grinder, this is from Northern Tool, and I made these water shields and just put some rubber water stops underneath them. This one drains down into this bucket. I spend most of my time on this one. But so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on here and I'm going to put the convexity on this, get my center line down the edge of the platform correct into the center of the point, and I am going to establish a median ridge in the center. Now this ridge will be pretty sharp at first, and the reason I create this median ridge is I don't want any flat spots that's going to stop my flake. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a center line down here, down the platform, and then I am going to put a ridge down the middle. But later in the grinding process, you'll see how I'll blend that ridge out to where it's just a very smooth transition across there. But I want to create the ridge first to make sure I have no flat spots in the material, because that will shut down your flake faster than anything. So I'll be back after I get this ground down and kind of in a pre-shape, and explain some things from there. Okay, so I'm back. I'll talk to you just a little bit about the grits I use. On my 8-inch wheel, I start off with the 80 grit and get it roughed in. I don't run it on the edges with 80 grit, it'll tear up the edges too much. And then I go to a 220 to get everything smoothed out, get my edges symmetrical the way I want them, the final shape, if you will. And then I go to my my flat 8, and I get this center ridge. If you can see it, if I can get the light to hit it just right, it's pretty pronounced. Runs right down the center of it. And then you can see where I built my ramp up the base. All still got pretty hard lines on them. But now I will be taking that over to my flat lap with my 600 grit, and I will round all this stuff off. It'll all be one smooth transition. And as you can see, it's lenticular in shape. It's thinner at the base, thinner at the tip, and then you got your convexity going to the center. This point is probably about a 1/4 inch thick or 250 thick, and right now my platforms are down to about maybe 0.25 thousandths. But if you deal with these thicknesses enough, you'll learn that it kind of sets up your angle for the rock and does it in the proper way. So if you got about anywhere from 220 to 250 thick, and say you come up with about an 030 platform, if that's what you feel comfortable with, or an 050, the angle when you're flaking is going to release nice and without resistance. Now if this was 320 thick and you're shooting up a steeper grade, you're going to dig deeper into the flakes, into the point, and it'll change your flake pattern. And but it just makes it easier to flake if these thicknesses are in this ballpark of 250 down to 030 to 050 on your platform. It'll almost automatically set your ankle up for the correct angle. But yeah, so now I'm going to take it to the 600. You can see my line is, center line is right down the center of the point. And I am going to take this to the 600 grit, and I'm going to round all this off, and I'm going to set up my platforms, and it'll be ready to start flaking. So be back in a minute. Okay, so I'm done with my 600. You can see I've smoothed that median ridge out of there. It's just a nice smooth transition. It'll help your flake terminations look a lot prettier when there's not a ridge there. It's still going to stop your flake because there's a hump there, but it's going to let it kind of just fare out into the other side, and then when you come back from the other way, you can either dig under it or it just blends into it when it fades out or terminates. On the platforms, it's very important once you put that angle on there that this edge isn't round. It should almost be sharp all the way. If it feels rounded or dull, your flaker's going to slip off there, and either you're not going to get a flake pattern or flake at all, or yeah, it's going to really mess up your flake pattern. You're going to dig deeper than the rest of the flakes. But that edge is 45 or in that area should come down sharp to the edge with no roundness on it. Same thing on this side. I can feel the sharp edge of it with my finger. I had to reshape the tip a little bit, so my platforms are a little thicker up there than what I want, but this is a black skin agate from India, and this stuff crunches really nice. And if you see my other videos on edge work, some materials crunch better than others. This stuff is really good about crunching. It crunches clean, so I'll be able to clean that up real easy on the thickness. But I'm looking at the point dry now, and I'm looking for any scratches or defects that will affect my flaking patterns or stop my flakes, and it's looking about right. I think I'm going to go ahead and flake it. But like I said, to me, prep work is the most important thing. If none of these things are set up right, there's going to be issues, and you'll just struggle and struggle until you figure them out, or just get whooped by them so many times that you start just taking the time to do it right. I've been grinding on this for well over an hour. I can do it a lot faster when my blades and grinders are new, but actually I think when it's a little bit slower I do a better job because the grits are worn down nice and gives me a smoother surface. But yeah, so I'm gonna do a video on flaking eventually, but just like anything else, flaking is something that is mostly muscle memory, and it takes just a matter of repetition and doing it. The only real secrets to any of it are the tools we use, the techniques we use, but a lot of that too is based on what kind of tools you have or what you prefer. So my advice on flaking is just keep flaking until it all comes to you. Try different methods, try different sizes of flakers. Find what works for you. I use a small flaker on all my points. This little guy right here, 6D nail I get from neolithics.com from Mr. Craig. That's all I ever use. And once I switched to this, I started clearing skin off almost every point, and it makes such a huge difference for me. And I don't know, it may not make that big a difference for somebody else, but it did for me. It focuses the energy better. I can see my platform as I get smaller and smaller in platforms. I can see the placement of the tip on the platform. But yeah, hopefully this one will flake out all right, and I'll end the video with that. So here's my first side flaked. You can see the deltas from where I took my flakes, and you can also see that I failed to get the skin off right in there. You can see it shining at you, and some up here by my thumb, just little tiny areas. I think I'm just going to regrind this whole point. I'm not going to try to throw any flakes at that. What caused that was my lack of concentration. For some reason I'm coming down with a really bad headache the last 15 minutes or so, and it's just a lack of concentration of not pushing my flake far enough. But so yeah, one of the reasons I flake one side at a time compared to some of the other people out there is just because of this. That side I'm not going to have to do anything with. This side I just regrind it, cuts my work in half if I have rework, and I just regrind this, reset my platforms, and start flaking again. So yeah, that's just the main reason why I flake one side at one time. People say, oh, it'll mess up your flake patterns. Well, it's whatever you get used to doing. You can see my flakes up in here. They're pretty much in line with each other going across there. So it's just a matter of practicing and getting your flake patterns down with and what works for you. I mean, if you want to flake half of this and flip it over and flake this other half, I mean, that's fine. I mean, do it however you want. But this is what works for me, and who knows, maybe someday I'll change my methods, but right now it seems to work. But anyhow, prep work on the preforms is so crucial. No scratches, no flat spots going down the center of your point or anywhere on your point, because it will stop your flake in its tracks. You want lenticular both directions, and get your thicknesses set nice and thin for, I'd say, 1/4 inch. And platforms work on about 030 to 050, and it will really help you out getting your flakes to travel.